Hello and welcome to Hospitality Talks. I'm Katy Moses, founder and MD of KAM, and I am joined today by the on-trade channel director of Pernod Ricard, James Bremner. James, thank you so much for joining me. I very much doubt that there's anybody out there that doesn't know who Pernod Ricard are, but just in case, do you just want to give us a bit of an overview of who you are and who Pernod Ricard are?
Cool. Thanks, Katy. So thanks for having me, first of all. So Pernod Ricard are a wine and spirits company, number 2 globally, and in the UK we are number 2 in the on-trade. So we look after and support a number of brands from Malfy, Beefeater, Jameson, Malibu, some of the sort of top brands in the UK consumer palette and sort of portfolio of choice. And myself, so I've been at Pernod Ricard for 10 years, 11 years nearly. Worked across multiple channels on and off trade and worked with a few other suppliers along the way.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Now, I want to concentrate mostly on spirits today. I know that obviously you do have your wine portfolio as well. What I'm really keen to understand is whether you've seen any massive consumption changes in the last 18 months, and the obvious on-trade being closed for the majority of it aside. What kind of consumption changes are we looking at in the consumer?
Yeah, so I think, again, that aside, which is sort of not one of the easy things to not talk about, but I think since the reopening and in the sort of previous reopening, the big trends we've seen are around cocktails, flavours, and certain categories. So if I look at cocktails, the sort of key thing we've seen coming out of lockdown is consumers going back into hospitality to look for serves that are harder to recreate at home. You know, we did see there was a big spike in cocktail shaper ownership from a survey we did for people at home. We saw the shape of the sort of top 10 cocktails adapt, where you'd see more classic recipes being made at home. But what that's done is build, I think, a awareness, but also a sort of passion for cocktails, and people have come out looking for those serves that they maybe couldn't recreate at home, or they just look forward to going out to hospitality for all the great stuff that comes with having cocktails in a pub, bar, restaurant. I think from a cocktail point of view, you know, we've seen its share of spirits go from about up to about 6.5–7% of total spirits. So it's still quite low, and there's a lot of headroom. And we think there's definitely space where people are going to be flexing more into that, with more people stocking, making cocktails. And equally, you're looking at consumers. It's about 2/3 of consumers, CGA tell us, making or drinking cocktails more frequently when they go out since 2019. So you've seen this real shift in cocktail consumption, desire for trying new things, or going back to some classics that are harder to recreate at home, like the espresso martini or the passion fruit martini. And a stat that we got from CGA, which was really great for people in the spirits industry, is average rate of sale for cocktails has risen 44%. Wow. In every month or every 4 weeks since May versus 2020. Wow. So you can just see it in the numbers, and you know, you can see it when you go out. People are more often drinking cocktails, demanding more, and the ranges are adapting. So that's from the cocktail point of view. From a flavours point of view, I think there's increasing focus on flavoured spirits. So traditionally, you know, there was multiple things that people would choose when they were selecting a spirit of choice. But often it's around flavour now as a key sort of choice metric that people take. And we're seeing the boundaries blur between different categories, but flavour being a predominant choice that they're taking. So especially gin and vodka, and equally driven by cocktails. But flavours are definitely a space I think we've seen accelerate in gins, but we're now seeing it across whiskies, we're seeing it across rums. And, you know, we're starting to play in that space. So Jameson Orange has recently launched. Whilst not a flavour, Havana Spice has launched, and we continue to innovate with things like Beefeater. So Peach and Raspberry launched around April time. So this trend in spirits is continuing, I think, adapting across multiple categories, which is quite exciting, really interesting. But it creates a lot of innovation that engages consumers, which is good. So from cocktails and flavours, I think generally, if you look at the trends in the last 18 months, and it is driven by cocktails, but also by occasion. You know, you're seeing licks and specs really drive hard as well as flavours. So that's from non-cream liqueurs and cream liqueurs in the way that people are consuming. You know, if you think when we came out of lockdown 1, I think it was, you know, the appetite for shots and compressing occasions into different venues like pubs certainly accelerated certain trends. or if you had a 2-hour booking window or an hour booking window at a venue,
Of course.
that certainly adapted the way that people consume. So that's accelerated some things as well. But have we seen the end of it? I know. I think there'll still be growth in the spirits section. It's taking share away from other categories, and the flavors, cocktails, and then the different categories are definitely driving a change in the way people see and consume spirits as well.
It's really interesting that you've just mentioned the fact that the classic cocktails are sort of making that comeback, and the purchasing of them is increasing, because we know that in times of turbulence, whether that's financial or otherwise, we know that people gravitate towards what they know. So from a grocery point of view, people will gravitate towards the brands they recognize, like Heinz and Kellogg's, etc. And we know that happens with brands, but it's interesting to see that it actually happens with products as well, and it's and actually those specific drinks. What's your approach to planning in the current climate? Because I mean, you've just mentioned there's a fair bit of MPD to have released, considering the situation that you found yourselves in. So what's the current approach for Pernod Ricard?
So we've been really conscious that with a reopening scenario, and we've only had really one to go off, which was last July. We know there was certain demand for certain categories. So from a planning point of view, we absolutely focused to upweight it in the stock we hold or the plans we have to get on the back or support key trends that we'd see. Difficulty is lockdown 1 and lockdown 3, the reopening period. What we didn't know was the impact on global logistics. So that's been a challenge, I think, everyone's experienced, and we've done well. We are doing our best and continue to try and create more robust plans and how we bring stock to market and all the other bits that everyone else is feeling at the moment. So from a planning point of view, with the best intentions, you plan with what you know. When you get things like the logistics things that's happened, of course you have to adapt, and that's what we're trying to do at the moment. But from a planning brands point of view, we've just been really focused on the things that are on the back of either long-term trends that accelerated or trends that we can see that have happened through lockdown that then move into the on-trade. So it's really, it's a case of trying to pick up on the things that we know are really at the front of consumers' minds. So flavors, cocktails, certain brands or certain trends. And we've been sort of selective in the things that we've launched. So I mentioned 3 there. We only launched 2 pre-October because we were conscious we didn't want to create complexity. And we launched Jameson Orange on the basis that we've got, a great opportunity with consumers in hospitality and businesses looking for other ways to excite consumers into new categories. So that's our approach to planning in a really simple way. Obviously, there's lots underneath it, and there's lots of teams that do lots of stuff that are much smarter than me. But that's sort of broadly the way we've approached it.
Okay, interesting. And you talk about long-term trends or trends that have accelerated. What effect has the sort of burgeoning low and no category had on the spirits category as a whole? I mean, do they work together? Do they work against each other? What are your views on that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting category, and I hear a lot about it. I think at the moment there is a lot of impressive stats on the brands, the proliferation of brands, the penetration of brands. It's not yet at the scale, I think, where we can really understand how it's impacting the whole spirits category. But I think brands like Gordon's and Tanqueray that come into the non-alc space certainly help simplify it. They're also quite disruptive. They invest a lot of money, which is great to expose the category and create a level which people understand their entry point. I think the sort of more mainstream consumer, they'll take some time to get into that as a choice they make within bars, pubs, restaurants, but obviously having 2 big brands behind it makes the category a bit more accessible from an off-trade point of view and an on-trade point of view. And then I think you've got some fantastic brands coming in. We have Cedars in the UK, and we've launched that 3 years ago. So quite an interesting journey we've been on understanding it. But you're seeing, quite a scale of brands in that space. Much like Heineken did for beer when they launched 0%, they've got the flavour right, they've got the execution right, and they've done pretty well with it. From my perspective, of course, not from a data point of view, I wouldn't be able to comment, but it's a pretty good execution.
Yeah.
So I think, it's yet to be seen. There's a lot of noise about it, and I think it's one that people continue to focus on. But it's definitely gathering momentum. You look at the distribution of the big brands that I mentioned, it's growing. But to what extent it's going to impact on spirits in terms of the replaceability in that moment, instinctively, I think you can say, yes, people will trade into that space for part of their moderation. but equally to what extent that becomes part of someone's everyday portfolio is still yet to be seen. But I think it's definitely an exciting space to watch.
Yeah, definitely one to watch. So we've talked about flavors, we've talked about low and no, we've talked about the return to classic cocktails. What is next? Finally, what is next for the spirits category? If you had your crystal ball, James, what are you telling me?
So just on the point of return to classic cocktails, that was very much at home occasion.
Yes,
I think what we've seen is people returning to sort of classic top 10 favourites and accelerating. Interesting stat again from CGA was the passion fruit martini, I'll call it, was about just under a quarter of all cocktail serves since reopening, which is amazing, really. If you think, my memory from, I think 3 years ago, it was about 16-17% of category. So there's definitely, the desire for that as a cocktail to go back out. But I think the classic cocktail is definitely an at-home thing where people went back to simplicity and what they know. So just on that point, on the future, if I polish my crystal ball, I do think spirits have still got space to grow. They've taken around 2% TBA share of the category. So that's with consumer changing, looking for innovation, excitement, which spirits offers with its sort of wide-ranging flavour profiles, different concepts and new stuff coming out, especially no and low as well. So it gives us confidence because it's following what a lot of agencies or data houses would look at the future CAGR growth of it. It's following that quite closely. I think also premiumisation will continue. We saw after 2008 recession, when again the world really shifted in how everyone saw it, and there was lots of stuff going on, and we've sort of gone through that plus a consumer pandemic and all that stuff will change. But I think what we're seeing is people want to drink less but better. So premiumisation I think will continue. How that goes into different categories will evolve, and what happens there will ultimately be down to consumer appetite. But we've seen the continued growth of premium spirits as people want to drink better and try different things. And I also think what our category team would call the democratisation of cocktails, with more cocktail ownership at home, more people offering cocktails. I think we'll see this continued trend in the way that spirits are used, the blurring of the boundaries between categories, but also the different products that come out. There's a lot of innovation in the market, and I think that will obviously accelerate as people see different categories changing. But the potential value of cocktails, I think, still has a lot of space to grow. As I mentioned, 6.5-7% of spirits volume, according to CGA. So that space, I think, will grow as operators look for value creation, offering consumers with higher expectations something different, or even in a restaurant, an espresso martini at the end of dinner instead of a pudding. You see that a lot in sort of premium restaurants, but those sorts of things I think will start to evolve and adapt as they become more accessible. But also people want that more. They want the offer to be expanded. The difficulty, of course, is how as an operator you adapt with that pace of change within consumer expectation and deliver on that expectation in the right venue at the right price and all that sort of stuff.
And with not enough staff and not enough deliveries, yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a load of challenges, but ultimately I think, innovation will help accelerate it. You've got premiumisation and you've got this cocktail trend and this flavour trend, which is definitely going to accelerate suppliers, but also other businesses to try and look at ways to capture the consumer's mind in that sort of space.
Yeah, absolutely. James, thank you. That has been incredibly educational. I feel like I know everything there is to know about the spirits market all of a sudden. And but you've also, you've highlighted some of the areas that we as a company are looking at, research-wise, and it's made me realise that there's a lot that we still don't know out there, and there's a lot to get on with. I will leave you be now and let you get on with your day. But just before I do that, I must say, if you don't get Jason Orange involved in marketing Jameson's Orange, then you guys are missing a trick.
Yeah, I'll speak to the brand team. I'll call them now. Yeah.
Brilliant. James, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you soon.